Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Clarksville-Montgomery County Public Library. Miss Mary here, bringing you another bedtime stories. And this week, we're doing springtime and flowers. All the flowers are starting to bloom. I've got some gorgeous flowers out in the yard, and I certainly hope you do too. This is called Fletcher and the Springtime Blossoms, and it's by Julia Robinson. The woods were full of chirping, bustling, sing-song sounds of spring. Fletcher bounced along with his nose in the air, sniffing just the burst of buds of the flowers and playing chase with butterflies, with his head spinning with sights and sounds. He tumbled happily down the hill into the sunny orchard, but when he picked himself up from the ground, he couldn't believe his eyes. What do you think he saw? A soft breeze danced through the branches, carrying snowflakes. Snow so late in the spring, thought Fletcher. It will be too cold for the buds and the butterflies. There's no time to lose. Look at him behind the tree. He's looking at all the snow falling. Looking for someone to tell, he trotted back up the hill and passed a pair of birds cuckooing on the branches. "You've flown down from your summer home too soon," Fletcher cried. "I've been down to the orchard, and there's more snow on the way." "Then we should fly back south," they called. "But first, we must tell Porcupine. He has just come out of his bed of leaves, and he needs to snuggle back down, or he'll freeze." Fletcher and the birds found Porcupine stretching and scritching and scratching. "There's snow on the way," panted Fletcher. "I saw it in the orchard. It will be too cold for the butterflies. The birds will need to fly south, and you must hide away." "Then I should crawl back into my bed," snuffled Porcupine sadly. "But first we must tell Squirrel that he needs to hunt for more food. He's eaten his winter stores of nuts, and he'll need to find some more." Fletcher, the birds, and the porcupine found Squirrel scampering after sunbeams. "Snow is blowing in from the orchard," gasped Fletcher. "It'll be too cold for the butterflies, and the birds will need to fly south, and poor Porcupine must go back to bed, and you must find some food." "You're right. I've eaten my spring feast," said Squirrel, "and all my stores are gone. But before I hunt for more, we need to tell the rabbits to munch as much grass as they can before the snow falls." Fletcher, the birds, Porcupine, and Squirrel hurried off again. The rabbits were rolling down the hill next to their burrow. "Stop playing," cried Fletcher. "There's snow blowing in from the orchard. It will be too cold for the butterflies, and the birds will need to fly south, and poor Porcupine must go back to bed. Squirrel needs to find food, and you must munch more grass." "Before we eat," said the rabbit, staggering dizzily to their feet, "let's go play in the snow." So the rabbits hoppity-roly-poly plopped down the hill through the woods. They were chased by Squirrel, Porcupine, the birds, and a bouncy full of importance fox, all the way to the orchard, where the ground was white with, do you think it was snow? Let's see. It was full of blossoms. Blossoms bobbling into the branches, blossom blowing in the breeze, blossoms blanketing the ground, and not one snowflake to be found. "Those are blossoms, not snow, you silly fox," the animals cried. Fletcher blinked and rubbed his eyes, feeling very silly. But then the animal scooped up pawfuls and clawfuls of blossoms from the ground and covered him in a thickly shower of fluttering white petals. Fletcher and his friends ran and played between the trees until at last they all collapsed in blossoms, soft white heaps. Look at them. They've got so many blossoms all over them. Then the birds fluttered back to their branch with beakfuls of blossoms to line their nest. Porcupine snuffled off up the slope, his quills dotted with tiny white petals. Squirrel went chasing up and down trees after snow-white petals dancing in the breeze. And the rabbits bounced back up the hill with blossoms to brighten their burrows. But Fletcher just laid, smiling in his soft bed of petals, watching the blossom branches bobbing overhead. Look at him. He is so laid back on the ground in all of his comfort of little petals. And that is Fletcher and the springtime blossoms. He sure had everybody running for cover, didn't they? Thinking it was snowing outside. Wow. That is a good story. My other book for tonight is by Vicki Whipple, and it's called The Little Weed Flower. Look how small and tiny she is. Let's see what she does. Rooted in a corner of a weed patch lived a tiny little weed flower. She would gaze at the beautiful garden nearby and listen to the flowers. She could hear the snapdragons bragging about how gorgeous and bright red buds, the daisies boasting about the glistening white petals, and the rose proudly discussing her luscious red blooms. The little weed flower longed to be in a garden with them. Look, she's in her own little weed garden over here, and here are all the pretty bright colored flowers. Each day, a gentle gardener tended his precious garden. He thought that every day and every flower was beautiful and unique. As the little weed flower watched the gardener water the flowers, she noticed them to perk up. She wished that the gardener would take her into the beautiful garden and care for her too. Look at her, she's peeping around the corner just hoping. The thistle, the dandelion, and the crabgrass teased her daily. They asked, "Are you not good enough for us?" "No," she replied, "I just don't know where I belong." Each day the gardener talked to the flowers. Their beautiful colors brought him joy. When the gardener walked by the weed patch, the little weed flower fluffed her petals, hoping that the gardener would notice her. Unfortunately, he did not. The weeds watched the little weed flower and snarled at her. "We're happy right here. You should be too." Sadly, she wasn't. One day the gardener walked along the path. He noticed an unusual bird among the flock. The bird was different from the rest. It flew down into the weed patch and began scratching at the ground. The bird saw the little weed flower. "Why are you not in the garden?" he asked. The little weed flower replied, "I'm hoping that the gardener will take me to the garden. It looks as though you need a little help along the way," said the bird. How's that big old bird going to help that little flower? Do you think that he can? Suddenly, the bird flopped on the ground. It squawked and flapped its wings. The bird's body pointed like an arrow straight at the little weed flower. Do you think the farmer's going to notice that? The gardener noticed the little weed flower as the bird flew away, and he walked into the weed patch and scooped her up, roots and all. "Your petals are pale, but you dug your roots in deep to find water. You belong with all of the other flowers. You are charming in my eyes, little weed flower." "Charming? Oh, he thinks I'm charming," she shouted. This filled her to the roots with happiness. The gardener found a perfect spot for her in the garden. He dug a deep hole and watered her until she shined. The other flowers were not happy to see her. "You are not worthy of being in our garden." "You came from the weed patch," they shouted. She was sad, but she remembered what the gardener had told her. What did the garden tell her? That she was charming. This little weed flower was charming. Every time the gardener came, the little weed flower fluffed her petals, spread her leaves, and smiled. When the gardener left, she talked about how wonderful he was. The flowers laughed at her. "We are beautiful without the gardener, and always will be," they replied. "The gardener cares for us all," the little weed flower whispered. Then for a few days the gardener was unable to water the flowers. The flowers whined that they were wilting under the hot sun, but the little weed flower did not complain, not once. She told the flowers not to give up hope and to dig their roots in deep into the soil to find water. And she told them that the gardener would be back. The flowers followed her suggestions. Look how wilted the flowers. Now look at the little weed flower. Is she all wilted over like that? No, she has dug her roots in deep. Soon the gardener returned. "My love is strong for all of you in my garden. I knew you would not give up hope," he said. The other flowers finally understood that without the gardener's love, they would not have true beauty. The gardener made a home for the new feathered friend in the garden. Look at this birdhouse. And he's got a perch to sit on. Wow. Many say that with hope in her heart, help along the way from a friend, and the love of the gardener, the little weed flower became the most charming flower in the garden. I think I could see that, don't you all? And there is the bird, I believe it looks like a hawk to me, is there watching over all the flowers. So this kind of teaches you to be kind all the time. And that is The Little Weed Flower by Vicki Whipple. And that's a very charming book. So those were books for tonight. So now it's time for you to take that deep breath and raise those little arms and stretch them up high, because you got to get that stretch out before we go to bed. And bring them on back down and put them in your lap, because now story time is over. And it's time for Miss Mary to say goodbye until next week. See you then.
We know this past year has been a little strange. So if you're tired of just hanging around, doing the same old thing, if you're looking for something new, take a trip to a place that has fun stuff for kids to do all summer long. Your library has cool activities and resources ready and waiting in the summer reading program. In fact, they have good stuff for the whole family. All your favorite books and a lot more. Visit your local library's website to get started. Don't worry, there are virtual options too, interactive games and crafts and activities. Plus, there's free movies, music, and TV shows available online and in person. Come on, take a trip. Whether you go with the group or log on from home, we've got a Summers with the Fun ready for you. So tell your friends and make plans to join us for the summer reading program. This summer we celebrate animal stories with the theme Tales and Tales. Check out your local library for more details. See you there!